Welcome to Beyond Rockets. Hope you're having a great day. My name is Clark Dunn and I'm your host. Get ready to enjoy some awesome conversations from Huntsville locals about cool work they are doing right here in the Rocket City. You can connect with us on social media at Beyond Rockets. And if you're interested in doing a podcast yourself, I'd love to hear from you. You can visit my website, beyondrockets.com today, or connect with me on LinkedIn at Clark Dunn. Sit back and enjoy this episode of Beyond Rockets.
Everything I liked except the way she talked to me every day.
This episode is sponsored by Yellowhammer Brewing. Yellowhammer is a local craft brewery serving Huntsville for the past 14 years. They are known for their premium craft beers like their T-Minus and Rebellion, but what you might not know is they also offer spirits, wine, seltzers, and non-alcoholic drinks. Next time you stop by their location, try one of their seasonal cocktails made with the Gemini Bourbon or the Yellowhammer Vodka, or try this year's big hit Pineapple Punch Seltzer. You can find out more information about Yellowhammer Brewery by visiting their website, yellowhammerbrewery.com, or visiting their tap room located at Campus 805. Well, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. This is, I was looking at it before you came in, 3 years. I think it was August of 21 or 22 you came on.
Time flies.
Yeah, it does. It's insane. I think we did the first time you came on, we did it at your house.
Yes.
Now you're in my studio. I don't think I even had a studio when we first did the podcast. So lots changed. But for those that maybe don't know who you are, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm Allie. My social handles are at Sugar Pusher on TikTok and Instagram. And I'm a former pastry chef and chocolatier turned digital content creator.
Yeah. And so your background too is also in the music industry. Talk a little bit about that, and then how becoming a digital influencer kind of happened upon you.
Yeah. So I used to be a musician. I was a singer-songwriter for many years. I had various songs on MTV, had a lot of fun with that. And then I had a copyright legal battle with some pop stars and just decided to step away from that industry. It was just really not my thing anymore. It kind of took the joy out of it for me. And so I left and I started, trying to have a lot of real jobs and going to, I was a paralegal for many years.
Wow.
And then I did, I was a pastry chef at a local fine dining restaurant, cake decorator at a grocery store. And I just kept trying, different things. I did HR at one point. I was trying everything. And I just couldn't find where I fit the way that I did with music, where it felt like I was getting up every day and I was doing what I loved doing and what I was supposed to be doing. And it felt right. Everything else felt like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. And the pandemic hit and I have an autoimmune disorder. So I was really in my house for about a year.
Wow.
And at that point, a friend was like, hey, you should try posting baking videos on TikTok. And she's younger than me, bless her. And I was like, I'm too old for that. I don't even think they allow old people on TikTok. So she was like, just trust me, do it. And within a few months, it started really taking off. And I was very surprised. So I really fell into what I'm doing now. It's something that I had wanted to do in a different capacity. I had thought about making like sort of travel food content, but I was just never confident enough to try it fully, because I was like, no, I often had two jobs at the same time, right? So I was always working, trying to stay afloat. And then the pandemic hit and I had nothing else to do. And I had nothing to lose. I had just lost my job as a paralegal like 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So I was like, okay, tried it. And it's worked out so well for me.
Yeah. And you started doing, I think what's interesting now is sort of the transition you've made in the business, because you do a lot of tiny cooking.
Yeah.
And when we first had you on, it was full-size cakes, full-size cupcakes, all of that. How did that transition go? And what kind of came about that opportunity to kind of get into miniature cooking?
Yeah, it's so basically the internet tells you what it wants. So you start making content and you have obviously, content pillars, right? So a lot of creators have 3 to 5 content pillars. So you'll make some people make like a get ready with me and then like a shopping haul and then those are content pillars. So like for me, it was trying different things and I was scraping. So on TikTok, my biggest thing at the time was like scraping frosting off of cakes, which was usually with a voiceover, with a very specific, calm voiceover voice. And people really liked that sort of aesthetic weirdness of like using all these different tools in my kitchen to scrape frostings off of my zombie cakes. That just blew up in a way I never thought it would. I'm like, doing recipes and I'm doing all these educational things that I think will be helpful. And TikTok was like, we want to watch you
Yeah.
scrape frosting off of cakes. And that's pretty much all we want.
Mm.
And so it came time, I started making smaller cakes. And then this company was like, can I send you a tiny oven? It's like a candlelight powered oven. I make it myself. Like they're a small company from Indonesia called Real Mini World.
Wow.
And it's only a few employees and they make everything by hand. So it takes a couple of months to get your order. But they were like, we really want to give you this and have you try it out. And so that was my first thing with like the really tiny cooking.
And around what time was that?
Couldn't tell you, a couple of years ago.
A couple of years,
so
okay.
Probably late, I want to say late 2022 maybe, but I have no concept of time anymore. So it was a couple of years into my content journey, and it was so interesting. As soon as I started doing it, people were like,
yeah. I mean, I've never seen anything like it before. And is the skill set to cook on a tiny oven different than the skill set to cook on a normal size oven? And what are some of the things that maybe you weren't prepared for when you started cooking miniature?
It's so much harder. So I think people think because it's smaller, it'll be easier. There's less material to use. Like when you're decorating a tiny cake. So like the drinks are fine. Those are easy until I drop them because they're small. But the tiny cakes and decorating a tiny cake is so much harder than decorating. I'd rather decorate a 4-tiered, huge, normal size wedding cake than the little tiny cake. They're so much harder to keep like on the little, and I have to make a lot of stuff myself, like little cake boards and, stuff. And I have to improvise with tools a lot of the times because there's only a couple of people that make the tiny stuff. A lot of it is dollhouse stuff. So there's a big, come to find out, community of tiny creators. And a lot of the stuff you see online with tiny food isn't real food because a lot of the tools aren't real. But the company that I buy a lot of stuff from, they make real working stuff. So like it is a candle powered oven. It takes longer to bake, obviously. Certain things like a cake, easy, but like cookies don't really brown. So you'll have to put them in and cook them and then brown them in your toaster oven and then create that sort of camera magic.
And all of that was just trial and error as you were building out, hey, I want to do this in this tiny oven. What is this going to look like? How often? So like if you're recording a video for cookies and you want to do it in your tiny oven, how many times or how many takes were you doing to get that to look the way it did when you actually posted it?
Usually only like once or twice.
Okay.
There are some things that's usually my error of dropping. People love when I post outtakes in my stories where I'm like, I'll be almost finished with the video and I'll have like a full tiny drink. And those cups and mugs are like this big. And I will just like take it and it will just drop, or I'll move the wrong way or the table will move the wrong way and everything falls. And it's the worst.
But people love to see that.
People love to see it, but then I can just remake it and I don't have to film all that, all the front end stuff. I just remake it exactly the same and finish that final shot. Thankfully for me, it is usually towards the final shot that I ruin something, like a giant that's just like stomping through the tiny kitchen. But yeah, it's just been a really interesting journey of trial and error because who do you learn from?
Yeah. I mean, you're kind of creating your own little path. And it's incredible just to see, like thinking back when you were first starting and you started seeing some popularity with this content. What was it like when you had that first company or sponsorship reach out? Like, what was that feeling like when you got that email, when you got that DM? And then how did you go about navigating, like, what is it worth? Like what is my worth for them? And then what can I say that is not like, oh my gosh, that's so much, or, oh my gosh, that's so little. And it's so easy for them to say yes. Like, how did you go about that?
I'm so lucky that in the community that I'm in amongst food creators, that a lot of my peers are really open and really transparent about how much we're making because we support each other. And if one company takes advantage of us, they're going to take advantage of all the creators that they get, right? So there's this sort of, when you're starting and you have a smaller following and your goal is, I need more followers, right? I want to get bigger. And this company has way more followers than me and they can give me exposure. So a lot of times when you're in that beginning stage, you're maybe going, I'll work in exchange for product,
Yeah.
or I'll work in exchange for this company that has way more followers than me posting about me. Um, and that works for smaller creators, right? But every time you do that, as you grow, a lot of people don't renegotiate that relationship, right? So creators won't renegotiate and they'll get a bunch of followers, and those companies will still just be trying to work with them for free
Yeah.
or in exchange for, low ticket items. Um, which is why I always encourage content creators charge. It's the hardest thing to figure
Oh,
out
for
how
sure.
to charge. And it's not the same for anybody, right?
Mm-mm.
Like I know from some of my food creator friends that mommy bloggers and mommy content creators get paid way more than food content creators do. Beauty creators often get paid more than food creators do. I know that a lot of male food content creators get paid significantly more than female food content creators of the same audience size do. So it's just really interesting because again, who are you going to ask? Like how to learn tiny baking? It's the same thing, like, right? Like who are you going to ask? For me, I've been fortunate to have a lot of people guide me along the way, have peers that are transparent about what they're making. I had a friend last year that had worked for a company that had reached out to me, and she said, this is how much they paid us. And she had just slightly more followers than I did. So my management company kind of adjusted that rate. And that was so helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because the initial offer is often way less than they'll actually pay you. And you just have to have confidence. If you can find peers that you can speak with that, can help give you that information, that's always helpful. Shoot your shot and reach out and make friends and connections with other creators. There can sometimes be this thing when you're kind of starting out of thinking like, oh, this creator that has more followers than me might not want to be my friend.
Or
They
their
might
competition.
Not. Yeah, their competition. Yeah. And it just isn't. You'd be surprised to find that there are some of those creators out there, but a lot of creators have this really helpful spirit. And that is the thing that I love most about like the genre of content that I'm in, is that almost everybody I've encountered has been so helpful, but pricing is so personal and it's so difficult. It's so difficult. I will say if you get to the point where you can get a management agency, it makes it easier.
Yes. Yeah. And it's one of those things too. It's, that this idea too, as the popularity, even with podcasting, has grown over the last few years, I come across the conversations of, I don't want to compete with X person that has a podcast, but at the end of the day, same thing with being a content creator like yourself. The content and the way you approach it is not going to be the exact same. Though you might have same people on, you might have the same product you create at the end. It might be a cake and they might also create a cake. The way you shoot it, the way you like light it, the way you, there's 25 plus factors that go into the way you do it.
Yeah.
It's different than the way they do it.
Yeah.
I think for most people that are, maybe interested in being a digital content creator, I think one question that, they might have, and that I even have, is what follower growth were you at when you had that first opportunity?
I started getting opportunities pretty quick within my first year.
Okay.
But it was mostly working on trade, right? Or very, very, very low paying gigs. So a lot of companies will start off offering you $150 a video, which in comparison, I will say the highest I've ever been paid for one video with a management company who charges for usage rights, the length of the term that they're going to be able to use the video, et cetera, because those are all things you can charge for, people. I'd like to say that like content creators, especially ones that are getting started, often don't know that there is a list of things that you should be charging for. And you never want to sign a contract that's like, we can use this in perpetuity on all of our platforms for $150. Bye. So the most that I've ever been paid for a single video with usage rights terms is $12,000.
Wow.
And that's obviously more recent. Starting out, it was a lot of companies that either wanted to send me free stuff that often I didn't need, but it was like, oh, this company wants to work with me, or $150 a video. That's what a lot of companies will still come to me and say, literally they're asking for $10,000 worth of work and deliverables, and they want to pay me $150. And my management team is like, here's her rates.
Yeah. It's like, if you would, she would love to do it, but this is what it's going to look like. And I think what's incredible just to hear in this conversation is your transparency with the work you do. Because I think oftentimes from the outside, if someone's looking in to be a content creator or they see your stuff as a consumer, they think that there's no way that they're going to know the things that you've been telling. And I think that's incredible for me to hear. And I think it's incredible for the people that are listening and watching to kind of see that transparency that you do have. I think I heard you talk about this in a different podcast that you were on, but the inspiration with your late father and kind of the work he did that kind of now is kind of the work you do. Talk a little bit about all that.
Yeah, it's so weird. So my dad was a really, really amazing scale model builder. And he was a Navy veteran, nuclear weapons tech, and the chemicals that he worked with cleaning the warheads made him terminally ill, unfortunately, with a host of diseases, lupus and scleroderma primarily. And towards the end of his life, he had lost several fingers and he had really severe rheumatoid arthritis as well. So like his fingers were going all different ways, and he had 2 amputated, and he was still making scale model parts, right? So he would like get his own silicone, make his own silicone molds, cast everything out of whatever, use fiberglass, I don't know, and make all of these parts like truck parts and car parts for model cars and trucks, and then sell them online, even with the limited use of his hands, which was so amazing. But he was just so talented at what he did. And I never picked up on any of those skills, right? And so it was really funny to me when one day I realized, like, I now have this sort of scaled kitchen.
Yeah.
And I'm doing all of these tiny things that require a lot of really delicate work with my giant monster hands. And it was just so like, I don't know, rewarding for me. It was like, it felt like, like keeping his memory alive in a way, thinking back to him taking over all of my, like every time I had to build a diorama in school.
He's like, I got this.
Yeah. And I asked for his help. It would never be help. He'd be like, you're not going to do it. Just let me
I'll tell you what I did after I do it.
He's like, here, I know I'm going to do this better than you. I'm like, well, I really want to try. He's like, just trust me. I'm going to be better at it
and
than
then
you.
Look at you now. You're doing those same things, but making baked goods.
Yeah.
Which is
really
insane.
Weird. Yeah. And it's even weirder that this is the fact that really blows my mind, that I make money doing what I do. Like content is one thing, right? Yeah. But the niching down of content to the point where companies pay me to make tiny things and I'm now getting to the point where I'm starting to learn how to print and make tiny packaging. So it matches their packaging, it matches their logo, it matches their branding, which I just think is so fun, right? It's like, it really, I don't know. It's so weird. And when people ask me what I do for a living, it's so hard to explain.
Yeah. It's like, well, I bake, but online and in small form. It's like, wait a second. Those are 3 things that just don't seem to co-align with each other, but it does. And I think what's really cool too is last year you had your biggest video. I think I was looking at it. It was February 13th of 2024. And you had 127 million views on an Instagram reel. Talk a little bit about creating the video, when you uploaded the video, and that initial influx of views.
It was insane. A lot of those videos that I create, here's the first thing. People are like, how do you know what's going to go viral and what's not? I don't.
Yeah.
I can recreate the same pattern from a viral video over and over and over again. And those things won't go viral, no matter how much I follow that formula. For me personally, it's luck. It's luck and consistency, right? It's like continually throwing things at the wall, AKA posting, on a regular schedule, consistency, your audience knowing that you're going to be posting every day, every other day, once a day. It was so crazy to me because that was such a quick video. I filmed it kind of on the fly, last minute, didn't really plan it out, posted it, and it didn't go viral right away. Like it did pretty well, but that video continued to go for like 6 months. It just kept going and going and going and going, which was what was really interesting to me, was that it just kept snowballing. It ended up doubling my follower count on Instagram. So it took me from like 200 to actually more than doubling, 200 to almost 500.
Yeah, because I noticed your Instagram, your YouTube still shows your followers on Instagram as 222,000.
That's so random.
And I was like, I thought it was a lot more than that. And I went over to Instagram and it was, 495,000 or whatever it is, which is incredible that, that one video over a 6-month time frame did that, like just reach that many people.
There is a downside to it, I will say, which is that when you gain that many followers, so when you have people want to go viral, right? The problem with going that viral is that it can significantly change your audience. It can significantly change that demographic, right? So like for a long time, my biggest audience was people around my age or in the 18 to 24 bracket. And very suddenly I had a lot of like younger followers who don't engage with my content, who came for one video, who quickly drop off when you post anything else. And so I've gone from I was at 495. I was so close to 500. I was so excited. And now I'm at 58 or something, because I have been hemorrhaging steadily 1,000 followers a week, no matter how many other viral videos I've had, because I had too big a period of growth.
Yeah.
And so I spoke with Meta recently and some other creators, and there was a whole thing. And that was one of my pain points, was this inability to keep that growth going after you have a super viral video. So that is the downside of growing that much that quickly, is that you may lose it. And I like to believe that is to give all the creators on Instagram a chance, right?
For sure.
A lot of people think, well, I'm not growing right now. It must be something I'm doing. No, you're going to have big waves as you're growing as a creator. You just have to keep consistent and understand you're going to lose some followers. Sometimes you're going to get stuck in a plateau where you're not growing. And I always like to think that means somebody else is growing right now. And my chance will come around.
And honestly too, if it's someone else in your industry that's growing and you're not growing at that time, that you're going to have that trickle down effect where the exposure for the industry you're in is going to be seen more, so that eventually you're going to see that uptick on your front. And I think not getting caught up in, hey, you're losing followers, I need to completely pivot what I'm doing. I think sticking true to what it is that you create and how it is that you create it, you're going to, like I said, you're going to see those ups and downs, but it's not being overly dramatic and saying, hey, this isn't working, I need to completely change my mindset of how I create videos and what I create.
And sometimes there's some creator forums where that is the answer to everything, right? And Instagram especially is well, your content just sucks then and you should change it. And it's no, that's not necessarily the right thing to tell creators. You can pivot and you can add a new content pillar in, right? You don't need to completely change everything you're doing if it's worked for you in the past, but the landscape of Instagram is changing. And I know for a fact that it is changing fast. It's going to change even more if the TikTok ban goes through and TikTok goes away. It's really going to change the landscape for creators. It's really going to hurt a lot. TikTok going away is really going to hurt a lot of creators. And I think a lot of people fail to understand how big the creator economy is and how much money creators are making and pumping back into the economy. And it's really sad, but that is going to significantly impact the type of content that's getting pushed out on Instagram. So again, remaining consistent, not letting it get you down. If your peers are, for me, you said I'm transparent. I'm very transparent. I'm not a gatekeeper. I'll tell anybody anything that I can legally that I haven't signed an NDA on.
Sure.
I will tell you, I will help you. I think a lot of people look at creators that are sort of in my follower bracket and think, oh,
they're never going to talk to me. They're never going to.
Yeah. And it's ask me anything. Ask me anything. I'm so open about it.
I mean, the first time I had you on, I had never met you. I just sent you a message and you're like, yeah, sure. I'd love to do it. And as I was getting ready to plan for this year, it was I should have her back on. It's been 3 years. And so it was such an easy, hey, do you want to come back on? Absolutely. I would like to come back. And so I think, you don't know unless you ask.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the hiccup that most people get caught up on is, I don't need to bother them, or they're never going to respond. So why even try? It's well, you don't know.
Yeah.
And I think putting yourself out there is vulnerable in some cases, but being able to say hey, at the end of the day, if they don't respond, they don't respond. And if they do respond, I'll do my best to either provide the value that hopefully, do a good job in that communication, but also it's not the end of the world if they don't respond.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to build community, right? if you're in this kind of weird, unconventional sort of space as a creative, right? Creatives have it hard enough as it is. Like
Mm.
I have a lot of people all day, every day on threads and other platforms telling me my job isn't a real job. And I'm like, well, thank you, but I make 4 times what I did in my real job,
Yeah.
you know,
And
when I
I'm
was
doing it at
paralegal.
home.
And I'm doing it at home where it's easier for me as somebody who has physical, you know, limitations on what I can do because I'm chronically ill. And so it's great for me and it makes my mental health a lot better because I'm doing like what I enjoy doing and it's still pretty
And
stressful.
eating some really great treats too.
Yeah, yes. And it's still pretty stressful, right? You're still running your own business and
For sure.
sometimes there's some high dollar deals that feel really stressful. Thank goodness for my management company. But like I like to help other people. I like to be transparent about what I'm doing. I have another creator that has bigger following than me, and she's really talented, and we've kind of come up at the same time. And I recommended her to my management team. I said, "You need a manager." And my management team was like, "Well, she's kind of similar to what you're doing. Are you okay with that?"
Yeah. You're like,
And I was like, "Yeah, I love her work, and we're different enough that like
mm,
I'm not upset if she gets a gig from somebody I'd like to have a gig from because I admire her and I love her content." And sometimes people get really surprised by that I'm like, yeah, no, join my management team, or here's a contact for you in this team, or here's somebody I can contact here to try and help you. Like for me as a creative in the music industry, it was the exact opposite. I didn't have a lot of people that wanted to share their secrets or help. And so I've tried to really embody what I would have wanted as a 20-something-year-old musician in that creative field that was already really hard as a woman in pop punk music. I try to really embody what I would have wanted then, now in this creative path that I'm on. And I always think about like it coming back to me if I'm, you know, helpful. That's of course not the goal, but like just that it puts good things out into
Yeah.
the universe for me, the more helpful I am to other people. Because a lot of people don't know what they're doing when they get in one of these creative positions.
especially when they start seeing success.
Yeah. And it's like, it just feels good to me to be helpful and to be kind and to like, how would I want somebody else to treat me, or what break would I want? You know what I mean? If
Yeah.
I were just starting again, always trying to be helpful and always encouraging other creators to kind of keep that same open-minded, helpful attitude instead of every man for themselves, like every woman for themselves. Like, no, I'm going to gatekeep and
Yeah.
this person could get one of my jobs. I got enough jobs. I literally tell a company if they reach out to me and they want something that I'm like, either they don't want to pay me for it or it's not quite what I want to be doing or have too many other jobs on the plate. I will recommend a list of other creators
Wow.
that I respect and admire that I think would be really good fits for those jobs. And I don't know, something about that just makes me happy.
Yeah. And you talked, and I think what's interesting is you talked earlier about, you know, that video that did go that viral was something you didn't even really plan, but that consistency for what you do is important in knowing kind of the cadence at which you want to create content. How far out do you typically, are you like, if you were to look at your calendar today of, hey, here's what the rest of this month looks like. Do you know the kind of content? Do you plan that far out, or is it like a Monday? What do I want to do this week?
I in 2 months will have my diagnosis, but I'm pretty sure that I have ADHD. All the online tests say I have ADHD. So scheduling for me and planning for me is really difficult, and it greatly limits my creativity. So I'm a very like on the fly. Here's what I want to do for the day. I'll get started working when I can get myself past that like that dread of just like executive functioning problems, and I start filming. I'll be like, that's when it locks in for me. And I'm like, oh, I actually want to do this. Ooh, now I've done that. I want to do this with the tiny content. That's really easy, right? Because I can jump from one thing to another pretty quickly. They don't often take a lot of time to film. You know, the cakes take longer because you've got to bake them and then cool them just like a regular cake, and then frost it a little and then freeze it and then frost it again. And sometimes it takes forever. So that can take a couple of hours
And
overall.
people are only seeing 30 seconds.
Yeah. Oh, it's usually 15 with a
15.
tiny video.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's probably hour or more.
Yeah.
Wow.
Typically with the drinks, they're a lot easier. They come together a lot faster and I can film a lot more of them. But for me, it's really like creativity for me is the most important thing. I don't like forced creativity. There are things on my calendar that I have to do every week, you know, for certain companies. Again, my management company is so brilliant. I got very jaded by the first management company that I worked with a couple of years ago. They were not nice. They did not prioritize me. They really had, an A, B, C, D list of content creators and who they would put out jobs for. And then they expected me to still do a lot of the work myself. And I was like, why do I have to reach out to brands? Isn't that what you're getting paid 20% for? And the new company that I'm with that I'm so glad I took a chance on has been incredible. I just signed with them for 2 years. They're called Sparkle Agency, and they're originally from Italy, and they have an operation here now, and they're so awesome. And they've made my life so much easier because they will literally just negotiate it all for me and then put the content due date like on my calendar for me. I don't even have to put it on my calendar.
Wow, that's perfect.
Which helps me so much because I have so many
calendar things to put on.
And executive functioning issues, and the calendar stresses me
and
out.
It's like that just happens for you, and you get to look at it on the beginning of the week and go, oh, I have to do that this on Thursday.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so I'll do the thing I need to do, and then that will usually get me in the groove for the things I want to do. I will sit down, before like a holiday or a season starts, and I'll be like, here's a list of the things I'd like to make like throughout this season. So I'm getting ready to make my one for Valentine's Day, like all the stuff I want to make for Valentine's Day. And then it'll be spring and Easter. And then it's summer, which is the worst. And then it's Halloween, which is the best, Halloween and Christmas. And I just I'm really off the cuff with a lot of my content.
And I mean, I think that is, I think that's evident too. And I think it's seeing, how much of a factor is it with the trends and the music and things that are happening on social media that you integrate, or is it just things that you like that you're like? Because I noticed that you did a cake. I was actually watching the video right before you got here. It was pretty recently. You did a cake, and you had Taylor Swift music accompanying it, and you like wrote out the lyrics on the cake. Like that's Taylor Swift is very popular. Like how much does that play a factor in the content you create, and does it?
Yeah, it does sometimes. So I'm not a big, you're never going to catch me doing dances on TikTok. I'm not a big trend person. I will do it sometimes if I feel inspired by it. So my main thing is being authentic to myself and my brand that I have built. And that for me is being just authentic across the board. And I have a lot of different facets of my personality. And so I love lyric cakes. That's one of my favorite things to make. Sometimes the songs will be trending. Sometimes it'll be like just a trending topic like Taylor Swift. So I did a whole series of Taylor Swift themed lyric cakes because that's always going to be popular.
It always is.
I did the very demure, very mindful trend. I don't hop on a lot of trends, but I did that one, and boy, did people get angry about that. The things that people.
Yeah. Like how do you balance the comments? Like, do you read the comments? Do you engage with the comments?
I delete them. Okay. If anything's really hateful or nasty, I delete it. I used to engage more with it. And the official advice from the programs that I've been in at Meta and TikTok, not so much Meta, but at TikTok, it was very much, well, engagement's engagement. I don't like that. I started kind of coming off of TikTok when it became really clear that people only wanted me to post things that they could argue about in the comments. And it just started to feel really toxic. So I don't post on TikTok as often anymore because that in order to get the views that I used to get, I have to do things that I don't like to do. And so I just kind of post there every once in a while of stuff that I'm already posting on Instagram. So it's
primarily your Instagram and YouTube shorts kind of is like the short form. I don't even really
touch. I have to get more into YouTube now with TikTok going away. That's one of my goals this year. It's primarily Instagram right now and Threads.
Okay.
Love Threads. It's like early Twitter.
Okay.
It's so fun for me. It's just you can just say, you can be your real self on Threads and you can just say things. Yeah. And I like that. I can be silly over there. I can be a chaos goblin over there. I love that. But with Instagram, it's crazy. And the comments, it used to be that Instagram people didn't leave the mean comments, but now there are a lot of mean comments on Instagram and some scary, some scary comments that people have threatened violence against me over cake. And I'm like, it's a cake.
Yeah, it's a cake.
If you go to therapy.
Yeah.
I will advise that as somebody who's in multiple types of therapy myself, go to therapy. If you're this angry about a cake, there's something deeper going on. You should seek help, but genuinely that you should seek help for, because your behavior's scary.
Yeah.
And it's another thing being, I have noticed the difference between the type of comments that I as a female content creator get
Mm.
versus my male peers and what their comment sections look like. And it's very different.
Hmm.
And it's really upsetting that people feel so emboldened to speak to female content creators the way they do. I don't like it. It's the hardest part of my job. And people are like, well, you put your stuff out there, so you have to just deal with it. You're posting online. And it's like, no, creators aren't your punching bags
No.
for your emotional problems.
Yeah.
Like, think before you leave a comment. For me personally, I just delete it. I don't engage with it. Half the time I block the people because it's just not worth it. I don't want engagement that badly. And I certainly don't. I would engage and defend myself in the beginning. And now I'm like, I literally don't have time for you.
Yeah. And so as we're the beginning of 2025, great 2024, it seems like, as far as Sugar Pusher and the growth that you've had. As we're moving into the new year, there's some exciting things. We talked a little bit about it off air that you're going to be looking at doing this year. Anything you kind of want to tease or let people know about?
Yeah. So I am trying to start a podcast where I speak to other creators and creatives, not just creators, but creative people who have found success in, entrepreneurial or creative ventures. And I want to talk to them about their failures. I want to talk to them about how they had to fail to get to where they are to find success. Because for me, I had a lot of failures along the way that for a long time made me feel like I was going to be a failure forever. But without those things that I failed at, I wouldn't be where I am now, making more money than I've ever made, doing what I love every day, having a career that actually makes me really happy, that's so fun, and getting to have all these different opportunities and avenues that I have now that I wouldn't have had if I had stayed trying to fit myself into an 8-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And, when you lose that 8-to-5 job and you think, oh, I'm such a failure, I've messed up, or you lose your music career and you think, I worked my whole life for that. I worked for my music career since I was 4 years old. I knew that that's what I want. The first time I stepped on stage for a preschool Christmas pageant,
this is
this is the thing that I want to do forever. And you lose that and you think, I can never do another creative thing ever again. And then you find yourself in a position where it's like, okay, I have nothing else to lose. I'll try it. And it becomes successful. So for me, it's really talking to other people about not just their success, but their failure and how important it is to fail.
Yeah.
And how it's not the end of things. It's often the beginning of something way better.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I will definitely be tuning into that podcast. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Thinking about some of the failures you've had throughout your career, is there a correlation with a failure in one of those realms prior to baking that you're able to then apply to what you do now?
That's a really good question. I just try to learn from failure in every sense, right? So before I was married, right? I was single for a long time. And I would have these breakups, they were great when I was writing songs, let's be honest. But every time that a relationship would fail and I would feel so devastated and heartbroken, I would look at it as there's a lesson in this. There's a lesson in each of these failed relationships. And I think the same about jobs and careers, right? There is a lesson to be found here. What is the lesson? I'm always searching for what is the lesson that this failure can teach me. And so with the failure in music, it wasn't really a failure. I mean, I was successful at what I did. I may not have been huge, but I mean, I still make 12 cents in royalties off of my MTV placements every quarter. For me, it's really just, I had to learn that it was okay to be creative again and that it wasn't going to be the same way as it was in music and that not everybody was going to be as nefarious as they were in the music industry and that it was okay to try at being creative again. The biggest thing I learned was that you have to follow your gut. And if you have a passion, even if it's really hard, it may honestly be harder for you to just fit in to normal society and a normal job than it will be for you to tough out the first couple of years of hardship of starting your own thing and being able to see success. I just feel like people can be so much more successful doing things that they love.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think, I always, before I went full time, I always said my like idea was, the things you do most in your life is sleep and work. So you might as well have a bed you love and a job you love to do, because that's what you're going to be spending your life doing. And I think, though there is these big waves that come when you go out and be an entrepreneur, be a creator, or do something full time that's not the typical 9 to 5, health insurance, 401ks, all the things that you're supposed to do when you become an adult. That it's okay to fail, and it's okay to bounce. Like, you have to bounce back.
Yeah.
You can't let the failure basically say like, hey, this is never going to happen, because at the end of the day, like if that was the case, I would have stopped a long time ago.
Yeah. You have to pivot.
Yeah. 100%.
You really have to be, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to be a creative, if you want to do it for a living, you have to go with those waves. You really have to ride the waves. And sometimes you're going to be drowning underwater, thinking that you're never going to come back up. But if you stay consistent and persistent, listen, I realize I'm speaking from a place of privilege, right? Like, I have been literally poor. I mean, I have been literally poor. I didn't find my own financial stability until probably about 3 years ago. I'm going to be really honest with you. And so for me, I come from a place where, my husband owns our house. I had a place to live. I didn't have to worry about paying the mortgage. Our home is paid off. Like, our cars are paid off. I really had the room that I had never had earlier in my life when I was, working 2 jobs to keep my apartment. I had that room to fail, right? And I realized that for a lot of people in this economy, they don't have the room to fail. So I always suggest, like, with content, first of all, I have friends that come to me and they're like, how do you do it? Like, how do you do it? How do you get started? And I have friends that now make really great content because I was like, you just do it. You go with it.
You just have to start.
You have to start, and you can do it on the side. You can do it however you want it. All that matters is that you stay consistent.
Yeah.
And I had one friend come back to me and go, I don't know how you do this. It takes so long to edit a video. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
But she's doing it, and she's doing really well. And she's had a lot of follower growth really quickly. And it's just so awesome to see that. And it can give people such an avenue. Like, there's just so many things that we can teach other people. Like, everybody has some kind of skill. Creative people in particular have a whole host of weird, unconventional skills that they can teach other people. Right? Like, I don't know. I just try it if you want to try it. Like,
for sure.
Don't be afraid to try it. Ask other creators or creatives for advice, and, get in there and don't be afraid to do it.
Yeah. And I think kind of the last kind of full circle question and kind of the conversation I want to have now, you talked a lot about community in the creative realm that you are, but the community that you live in, Huntsville, is still a big part. And you've been able to actually collaborate with some local Honest Coffee as being one of them. Talk a little bit about that collab with Honest, what that looks like, and then maybe the effect it had on more of Huntsville knowing you.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So when I was in music, it was the opposite, right? It was like there was no music scene here. There was very little. I was making pop punk music when I first started out. I was like a front woman in a band, right? And a lot of the male musicians here, when I started finding success doing what I was doing, were really nasty to me. I mean, it was a bad time. So for a long time, I was like really down on Huntsville and really disappointed in Huntsville and the sort of creative community, but it's grown so much since then. And God, that was like 20 years ago. Oh, so old. And I just love where it's going. I love the direction. I love that there's like, I'm in a little like content creator group chat on Instagram with other local content creators. And there are so many more of them than you think there are locally, like doing so many awesome things, a lot that are showcasing local Huntsville stuff. The thing with honestly, is that I just go there every day.
Yeah. I mean, I see you there almost every time I'm there, and I'm there a lot too. So
I love it. Yeah. It's my favorite coffee shop in town. It's the only one I go to actually. And they were like, hey, do you want to collab on a drink together? And I was like, yes.
I mean, is that a trick question?
I was like,
absolutely.
Yes. And they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I don't know, but it needs to be pink. And then we brought in this company that I love called Amaretti, and they make extracts and syrups and all sorts of flavoring type things that are really, really true to what things actually taste like. And they're based out in Oxnard, California. They They actually flew me out the year before last to film in their test kitchen. They have this beautiful test kitchen. And so they flew me out to film YouTube content. And it was amazing. And you get to like see how everything works there. And I just love that. But I was like, I want to make a pink drink. I want it to be strawberry shortcake. I have the perfect syrup for it. Like we can partner with Amaretti on that. And it just turned out so awesome.
And it's been on the menu for quite a while.
Yeah, it comes back seasonally and people just seem to really love it. You know, we really worked with developing the flavor of it, adding, you know, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's fun, right? It's like, it's pink. It's fun. It feels like spring. They usually put it on the menu in spring and it feels like spring or summer. And it's so cute. And that it's just awesome. And it's been so interesting to get, more local people following me because of it, because I feel so like out in the ether sometimes with what I do. There's people from all over that follow me. And for a long time, you know, in Huntsville, people were not. And now I was actually in the grocery store a couple of weeks ago. This really sweet older woman came up and she was like, "Are you Sugar Pusher?" And I was like, yeah. She's like, "Oh my God, you make the tiny things. I was just looking at you in the magazine and in Huntsville City Lifestyle." Yeah. And it was just, she was so sweet. And it was so surreal because it was just like, oh no, like people know. Yeah. People know now.
That's crazy.
But it's so cool and it makes you feel so close, like closer to people in the community, which for me, I was lacking because again, I was home for at least a year during the pandemic. So like it feels nice to sort of make more community here and to see the rise of creatives in Huntsville, like being more accepted and more successful. And I love what's happening in the city now. It feels finally for me more like a place that I align with a bit better with like, you know, lots of cool new stuff coming and people, you know, you see people really starting to go, oh, I might be able to actually do this. And to see them find that courage and then find success at it, you know, at whatever level they're at. I love that. We have some amazing content creators here. Like, I
agree.
And entrepreneurs and creatives, but we have some really amazing content creators here. Roxanne Olaru, I don't know if you've seen her stuff. She makes predominantly like fashion content, but she edits it in really cool ways. She does a lot of really cool editing tricks. And like side by side where she is standing next to herself. And like, I can't do that kind of video editing. So it's really, really great to see. Could not be me, but she's so amazing. And she puts together, she shows you like wearing an outfit versus styling an outfit. And as somebody who like, boy, I try, but it's so amazing to see like just that. And then it's like, and she's got, you know, over 1 million followers on TikTok. She's got hundreds of thousands on Instagram. So you really have these people in Huntsville that are doing all sorts of things that you just wouldn't know about.
For sure.
And you run into them in the coffee shop and you don't know what people are doing now. And it's so cool that like lots of people are starting to find success here locally, whether they're showcasing local stuff or they're on a broader scope. It's so awesome.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we'll have to talk and get some of those names of other creators that maybe I'm not aware of that I would love to have them on here and have conversations like this. We'll be sure to have all your information in the episode notes, links to all Sugar Pushers, Instagrams, YouTube, all the things that you need to know for you and what you do. But I appreciate you being here. We'll have to have you back on in a few years and see how Sugar Pushers continuing to grow and expand its reach.
Well, I hope it's still going then. We'll see. You never know in the creative industry, but gonna try.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Beyond Rockets. Don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and on YouTube at Beyond Rockets. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Beyond Rockets to stay up to date with new episodes as they are released. Thank you so much for listening and I hope you enjoyed.